Have you ever wondered how much you can make working in tech? Well, today we're going to talk about money. In this video, I'm going to be revealing every single salary that I made in my 20s. Why? Because it's time to break the taboo on talking about money. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get started. Salaries can be a touchy subject. I feel like we grew up being told that it's taboo or gauche to talk about money. But in the tech world, I've seen firsthand how secrecy can actually lead to huge pay disparities and being underpaid compared to someone who has the same role as you. And let's face it, if you don't know what your peers are making, how do you know if you're being paid fairly? That's why I believe in full transparency. Discussing pay openly is really important, especially for women, so that we can make sure that we continue to level out the playing field. So let's get into it. How did I double my salary in just a couple of years while working in tech? Let's get into a little bit of background on how I started my career and how I got to working for 10 years in the tech industry in California. I studied economics at Columbia University, right in the heart of New York City. I think that being in New York really allowed me to explore different internships during the year so I could figure out what I really wanted to do after I graduated. Let's quickly talk about my internships and how much I was paid in those before we get into my full salaried jobs after college. The first one was between classes, I worked at a marketing consulting firm making $10 per hour for about 20 to 30 hours per week. I was juggling classes, this part-time consulting gig, but I felt like every single piece of real-world experience was really going to help pad my resume. Next, I worked as a research assistant at Columbia Business School for $25 per hour. This helped me use a lot of the skills I was learning in my statistics and economics classes to do some more complex data analysis with professors firsthand. Plus, professors make excellent references. The next internship that I had during the school year was at Viacom as part of the Nickelodeon ad sales research team. That was great. I got to go to Times Square every day. I was making $10 an hour there, and I got to do a lot of analysis on brands that partner with Nickelodeon for ad sales. The last internship that I had as an undergrad student was at Unilever. This was a summer internship, and I was working on the Dove Consumer Insights team, making about $25 an hour. It was more of a salary versus hourly wage, but I believe it was about $25 an hour. I learned about how global brands conduct market research, and this was something that I was able to use in my data analysis roles later on. All of these were internships that I did part-time during the year or during my summers in undergrad, and I think that they really helped me figure out what I like to do and develop some technical skills that I would use later on when I hit the full-time job market. Then senior year rolled around and I started interviewing for my first big girl job. When graduation rolled around, I had two offers that I was comparing, but because this was my first job, I didn't really have that many negotiation skills yet. I had a $75,000 per year offer from a small company in Connecticut, and I had a $65,000 offer plus a $4,000 signing bonus from a large software company in New York City. I was stoked, so happy, and I felt like my life was finally getting started. I got a big girl job. This was my first job out of college, and I picked the $65,000 salary at the tech company as an analytics consultant. But why did I choose the lower offer? First of all, I didn't want to commute to Connecticut every day. I wanted to stay in New York City. And second of all, this tech company had a lot of resources for training young professionals so that I could learn a lot of skills that I thought I would be able to use later on. I didn't see much opportunity for growth at the other company, but this tech company, which was IBM, had a really strong employee education program. I really wanted to learn SQL, Python, and other more complex data analysis skills. I knew that IBM would offer this to me because they're so committed to employee growth. Within that first year, I gained most of the technical foundation that I still rely on to this day. So here's key lesson number one. Don't just chase the highest salary. Chase the environment that will help you grow the most. Skills will compound exponentially over time, which really helps you get a higher salary further on down the road. So next came my second job and my move to San Francisco. I landed a job at a software as a service company for $80,000 a year plus stock options. They also paid for all of our moving fees. This was my first time negotiating my salary, and I was able to jump from $65,000 to $80,000 in 1 year. That is over a 20% bump in just 1 year. The company was valued at $1 billion when I joined and eventually went public and was sold for $6.4 billion. The big mistake I made, remember those stock options? Well, I didn't buy them. So I did not profit on my equity at this company. So what's a stock option and why didn't I buy them? A stock option is a contract that you make with a company where you have the option to buy stock at a predetermined price. They call this the strike price. This is generally quite a low price if the startup is still small. The hope is that eventually you can profit by selling those stocks later on down the road. But if the company goes under, you don't get anything. I wasn't willing to take the risk, and so I didn't buy those stock options. I was new to equity and investing, and so I didn't take advantage of the windfall that I could have gotten by selling that stock. This leads me to lesson number 2. Make sure that you always educate yourself on how equity works so you don't make the mistake I did. Oops. This brings us to my third career move and where things really started to pick up. When I was 24, I switched to a rideshare startup. This office was down the block from where we lived, so my commute was 2 minutes instead of 45 minutes when I was commuting down to Silicon Valley. I worked on helping the business scale its smaller markets, and then eventually I worked on the modeling for international expansion. They offered me $99,000 in salary plus equity. So that means that in 3 years, my salary went from $65,000 to $80,000 to $99,000. That is over a 50% increase in salary in just 3 years. Rideshare was about to get really, really big. Remember those stock options from the first company? Well, this time my equity was in restricted stock units. While options require the employee to spend their own money buying the shares, with RSUs, the employee is automatically granted the shares over time without having to buy them. Options are more risky because you have to put in your own money. But with RSUs, you are given shares over time, like a present. Let's take a look at why options are more risky and why I was super happy that this time and for the rest of my jobs, I got RSUs. Let's say that you buy one share for $10 and then it goes up to $15. That's great. You would make $5 off of that one share. However, if the share goes down to $5, you would lose $5 on that purchase because you bought it for 10 and you sold it for 5. And even worse, if the company goes to 0, then you lose everything you spent. With RSUs, whether the share is worth 10, 15, or 5, you are at least given something. I'm risk averse, so I always prefer getting equity in RSUs. When this rideshare company eventually went public, my equity also became very valuable. So even though I didn't negotiate the base salary aggressively, because I was just happy to cut down my commute and I thought the company was super cool, it did eventually pay off in my equity. So this brings us to lesson number 3, and that is sometimes moving from company to company can really help you increase your salary very quickly. I was able to increase my salary from $65,000 to $80,000 to $99,000 in just 3 years, not even including equity. With equity, I had already doubled my salary in 3 years. So remember, it might be an unpopular opinion to switch jobs every year, but it really worked out for me. And I've actually found as time goes on, my friends who switch jobs every year or so are the ones who see the highest salary bump. This was my absolute favorite place to work. I still look back to those days as my favorite days in the office. I brought my dog to work every day. I made incredible friends. The people there were quirky and fun and really sweet. We got free lunch and dinner and rideshare credits, which were super fun for a night out. It was really tough to leave, but I eventually did. This leads me to my 4th job and what rounded up my 10-year career in tech for now. In January 2020, I got a message from a director at a food delivery startup company. This role would allow me to leverage my analytical skills while also helping to guide the strategy of the company. So I responded to the message that I got from the director and I said, yeah, I'll interview for this role and we'll see what happens. So I got the job and they offered me $140,000 per year plus equity. At the time, this food delivery startup was not public yet. So even though I loved my job at the rideshare company, an increase from $99,000 to $140,000 in salary with equity, that ended up being $219,000 in that first year. That was too big to ignore. But I still loved my job that I was at. So I reached out to my manager and I asked if the rideshare company could meet the salary that this other company was offering me. Unfortunately, it was too big of a bump and so they were not able to. And so I sadly left all my friends and some awesome work to join the food delivery company. This was a totally serendipitous move because I had no idea that a couple months later, rideshare would get absolutely wrecked when the pandemic started. And in fact, my entire team at that rideshare company got laid off. I would have lost my job if I was still working there. So even though I was sad to leave that company, I felt super lucky that I still had a job because food delivery did very well during the pandemic. The timing of starting at the food delivery company ended up being perfect in an unexpected way. So let's take a look at what happened. At this point, my salary from my first job after college had increased from $65,000 to about $219,000 per year. That is over a 200% increase. I'm not going to go into how I was continuing to cash out my equity at both the rideshare and the food delivery company, but the point still stands. For now, we can just focus on the salary bump. I don't have some sort of insight about what startups are going to become huge public companies. I think I was just lucky. I had no idea that the pandemic was going to hit a couple months later and that food delivery was going to absolutely explode. I luckily joined a rocket ship. So this gets us to lesson number 4. And that is sometimes you just need a little bit of luck. If you haven't found your rocket ship yet, that's not necessarily your fault. Just keep on looking around and eventually you're going to find a company that really clicks. You never really know which companies are going to strike gold, but when they do, it's really worth it. Don't beat yourself up if you haven't found that company yet. A lot of it is luck. Pure luck. So let's review the 4 lessons that I learned from my decade working in tech. The first lesson that I learned from my first job is that focusing on skill acquisition early on in your career can really pay off later. For my first job, I didn't take the highest salary. I took the job that I knew was going to give me the skills that I would need to use later on down the road. The second lesson that I learned was educate yourself on equity and stock options. That way you can make a better informed decision as to whether or not you want to buy stock options and how you want to exercise your equity. I lost a lot of money by not exercising my stock options in my second job. The third lesson that I learned is that jumping from company to company relatively frequently can actually help your overall career trajectory and significantly increase your salary. By changing my job every year for the first 3 years of my career, I was able to increase my salary from $65,000 to $99,000. And this was able to set a baseline for the rest of my jobs. And that brings us to the 4th lesson. And that is that sometimes there's just a little bit or a lot of luck involved in the entire process. So don't get yourself down if the first, second, or third company that you work for isn't a rocket ship. So there you have it, my journey from $65,000 per year to over $200,000 per year. Remember, each role was a strategic change, focusing on skill growth, negotiation, and being transparent on salaries. Don't be afraid to discuss salaries. Information is power. Now I run my own business, but maybe I'll be back to the corporate tech world soon. We'll see. Looking back, I wouldn't trade my corporate experience for anything. It was such a great way to spend my 20s. Your 20s are a fantastic time to experiment and set yourself up for a solid financial future. Thank you so much for watching, and if you found this video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with somebody who might need that little push to ask for a salary bump. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!